I know you're gonna dig this.
Well, funk fans, here we are, another session of Funk Chronicles on the One TV with G. And man, do we have some more powerhouse guys in front of you today. So, gentlemen, please give me your names and who you are in the music industry.
My name is Keith Cheatham. I'm a former guitar player for the group Sun. That was pretty hot back in the late 70s. And I'm also guitarist for Bootsy Collins, present day.
Randy Villars. I was in Bootsy's band with Keith from 2011 to 2015. Grew up in Dayton. I'm also a jazz player in addition to playing the funk. Play saxophone and piano, and taught at the Stivers School for the Arts for 6 years. So I'm a player, and I'm a teacher, and I'm also a writer and composer.
Wow.
Save some for later, Randy.
I'm sorry. I'll dial it back. Sorry.
So, give me a little history, as if I didn't know.
Okay.
On the Dayton funk sound, you know, we say that there's a funk sound
Right.
that's unique to the Miami Valley or the Dayton area. And, you know, the groups that came out of here, I know you're familiar with them because you were here. You were there in its infancy.
Yeah. You know, a lot of groups came out of Dayton. I mean, from Heatwave, the Wild Players, the Sun. Everybody pretty much had their own unique style. But at the same time, you're talking funk R&B. It's the same and it's not the same at the same time. It's something that I don't think you're really going to see much more of, at least not from the younger musicians because of today's technology. But you know, it's just something that we need more of, and you know, I would love to see that come back.
Now, Randy, what would you attribute that to? It sounds like you were a teacher.
Yeah.
So what would you attribute the sound to as being, you know, unique and specific?
Well, it's like we were saying earlier on the show, the taping, that if you took the Dayton funk bands out of funk history, there'd be this gaping hole there. It wouldn't be the same. So I think that, you know, Dayton is arguably the funk capital of the world, as Bootsy used to say, every city we'd go to. So I think the basic elements of funk are that accent is on the one, coming out of James Brown, and Bootsy, of course, being with James Brown back in the late 60s. It's just that infectious groove, that real deep pocket, that very danceable groove, and I think that's the main element, really. It's just the feel. Like they asked Quincy Jones, what would your best piece of advice to young musicians be? And he said, I can tell you in one word, feel. And so that's what the funk is about, as far as I can tell. It's all about the feel of the music.
Yeah, you know, one of the components in the Funk Center is music instruction. And, you know, it's our belief that without the musical instruction is another reason why we've seen such a drop-off, especially as it relates to musicians in this area, not being able to even contribute because, like you were saying, there's no feel. You can't express yourself like we could back in the day by just learning how to play an instrument.
I think there's some things in the way these days. For one thing, I taught at Stivers from 2009 till just last fall. And what I learned about the Dayton Public Schools is that the funding has really gone away for the elementary schools. So now instead of starting at 9 years old, they're starting like at 12 years old, and so they're missing those 3 years or maybe even 4 years of playing their instrument. So by the time they get to junior high, 7th grade, they could be pretty far along if they started in the 4th grade. But now they're starting in the 7th grade. So that's a crucial amount of time, and it's really a shame what's happening with the funding. Music has been cut out in the elementary schools around here a lot. And Claude Thomas, you might know Claude, does Muse Machine now. He was the Stivers director and played alto sax with Ray Charles back in the day. And he also went to Ohio State. He was at Ohio State just before I was at Ohio State. And Claude told me that. He said, we're getting grand pianos coming into Stivers that used to be at the elementary schools because they don't use them anymore. And that's really sad. That's really sad. That's why you guys, I think, are needed at this point. I'm sure you probably have talked about having clinics and master classes. Yes, and I think I can speak for Keith. I certainly would love to be a part of that, come in and work with the kids, because I really enjoyed my time at Stivers, and I still have some of those kids as private students.
Oh, believe me, your numbers are already pinned in, not penciled in, pinned in.
All right.
And like you were saying, the funding went out of the arts, period.
Yeah.
And through our research, we learned that, it actually only costs, even though it may seem like it's a small dollar, it's $142 and change a year for music instruction for a student in the state of Ohio. That's what it costs. $142.
That's all.
That's all.
But I guess there's no excuse,
No, there's no excuse, but I guess when you spread that out over, 50, 60, 80, 100,000 students, if they were cutting the budget, that'd be something that they would probably think that they'd want to cut out. But what we're finding is that it's not only hurting them musically and creatively, their test scores are being affected. They're 18% lower than children who receive music instruction.
Yeah, I've always thought that in elementary schools especially,
very important.
You don't have to get real deep with instruction on a given instrument, but you certainly in a general music class could expose kids, especially with technology as it is today. You can show them music from all around the world. You can show them concerts. You can bring in instruments from, ethnic instruments of Africa, of Asia, of Europe. You can bring in all this stuff, and you could do so much to just give people some basic knowledge about music, but it's not being done. And I know with the sports programs, and I was a baseball player, so I'm not down on sports at all, don't get me wrong, but the sports programs, they're demanding that people pay. You got to buy your hockey equipment, you got to buy your soccer equipment, your baseball equipment, your football equipment. I don't know how much equipment you need for basketball, but I know there are fees there too. So, I'm not saying music should be done that way, but if they can continue these sports programs by charging parents when they're already paying tax dollars, why can't you do that a little bit with music? And I know nobody's going to be happy about paying more money, but it would be a way to keep the music in the schools.
It's an option, and we've discussed that, but it was never breached or brought to the parents that, okay, if you want your child to continue music instruction, then pay $100 a year. So it was never brought to them. It was just strictly cut out the budget.
I don't think enough emphasis is placed on explaining why music is so important. It's not just for fun. No. It's really good for your mind.
Discipline.
I think it was one of the philosophers, one of the early philosophers said, maybe Socrates, one of those guys, he said the two most important things in their culture back then were music and gymnastics. And because, it makes sense, right? Music is for the mind, and gymnastics, which is just sports, was for the body. So you should develop both, and music is just so important, you know. It's really a shame that it's not seen that way, and it'd be great if something could be done about that.
I see. Now we're going to have to bring you guys back because that's a whole different topic in
Yeah.
and of itself.
Yeah.
I'm sure we could talk an entire Sunday or Saturday afternoon specifically on that one subject. Now tell me this. Why hasn't funk music been celebrated years ago, and why is it taking so long for us as Daytonians to recognize our rich history and our contribution to music?
I'll let Keith field that one.
I mean, I think we've gotten away from it due to technology.
Yes, sir.
You know, when we were coming up, we didn't have computers and all the newfangled gadgets they have today. You know, it was either you learn how to play or you don't. Okay, nowadays you just have to push a button. You know, like my son, he's a rapper, and it took me a while to get used to that. But and he would get in the studio and he's doing his. What are you doing? Oh, Dad, it's the latest. I said, oh, dude, no. What? And I don't know. I get confused a lot of times, but that's what's happening today. You know, that's what they like. You do have a few out there that, well, when my kids were growing up, we made sure we taught them music. You know, we listened to music. We wouldn't allow them to listen to rap music, especially the gangster rap when it came around. And like my daughter, who also sings with Bootsy, you know, I taught her in an early age when you had a lot of the newer female artists coming up, and but I had her listening to Aretha Franklin and Gladys Knight, Barbra Streisand. Those are the artists that she likes. That's what she's into. And so I'm glad my wife and I did take the time to expose them to that type of music. So now today they appreciate it. So I think somewhere along the line that got lost, you know, in families, because music has always been a big deal, you know, when I was growing up. But as I said, technology took over, and I think a lot of these kids feel like, well, we don't have to learn how to play an instrument and spend years and years and years of trying to perfect that when all I have to do is go to my computer and push a button.
It's not now.
Yeah. So, no, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that funk has been pushed to the side and kind of ignored as compared to rock and roll and pop music. And I'm not sure of all the reasons for that, but I think you can probably look it up and research the history and find out that you know, it was its own thing. And I think the major labels kind of wanted to put people in boxes, and funk being kind of its own direction didn't want to go in those boxes. Certainly George Clinton didn't want to go in those boxes.
You can't chart funk music.
Right, yeah. So, you know, if you weren't going to play ball with them, then they were going to ignore you. And it's good that it happened that way, because if they had compromised, we wouldn't even have the art form. You wouldn't have had all this great music, you know.
Well, the sound was defining at the time. And as you both know, being in the music industry, it's still being used today via samples but you know, like the Wright brothers, people don't know that funk music came from the Miami Valley or the Dayton area. And people don't know that it came from here specifically. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think that's that whole New York thing, and that New York is the only place that really exists for music, you know, New York and LA, and in a lot of respects that's true, but you know, we're just a little bit too far west to be included in that whole Eastern Seaboard deal. So if you're in New York, or you're in Philly, you're in Detroit, maybe even Cleveland, you're still seen as part of that East Coast thing, but Dayton is just a little bit out of the way geographically, and so I think that's why it's kind of dismissed a little bit. It's like I have a friend from Los Angeles, great engineer, who came here for about 3 years and worked here in the 80s, and I worked with him. A great guy, Benny Facconi. He worked with Bruce Svedon, Michael Jackson's engineer on Thriller, worked at A&M with Herb Alpert, worked with Sting, Barbra Streisand, Dizzy Gillespie, all these great players. Anyway, so Benny is here, and he said, yeah, he goes, when they called me about this gig, about coming to Cincinnati and working at Audiocraft Recording Company, which was the studio where I was employed, he said, I had to look on the map to find where Cincinnati was. And of course, Dayton even more so. He goes, I never really knew where it was. People don't know, you know, so they know where LA is, they know where New York is, and all this other stuff is like somewhere in between, you know.
It's funny you should say that, because I lived in LA for 10 years and went out to pursue music. And I remember I was working for this company temporarily, and I was talking to some of the employees, and one of the guys asked me, he goes, where are you from? And I said, Cincinnati. And he goes, Cincinnati? He said, isn't that small town where they have chickens and pigs running around the street? I looked at him, and it just blew me away, and he was serious. You know? Serious. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of people really don't, I mean, like you say Dayton, Ohio. Okay, who would expect anything to happen in Dayton, Ohio? It's like, who cares? But you look back at the musical history of this town and all the groups that came out of here, man, it was like an explosion at the time. Even though Cincinnati is a bigger city, we didn't have, I'm from Cincinnati originally, but we didn't have this many groups coming out, so I eventually moved to Dayton. I lived out in Trotwood for several years. And but now I can, at my age, I can sit back and look and think like, wow, look at all these groups that came out of this city, you know, that really contributed a lot to the music industry. And not just R&B. No. I mean, R&B music, funk music has really branched off in a lot of different areas. And even worldwide, and all the touring that Randy and I did together with Bootsy, it's amazing to see people react to R&B music the way they do. And when we were out touring with Bootsy, the majority of the people in the audience were white. You very seldom saw black people.
And I found that out about George Clinton, too, about Parliament Funkadelic. Frankie Cashwati, Bootsy's drummer, told me, he said, the Parliament Funkadelic audience is mainly white people. And that shocked me. I didn't know that.
They were in Chicago one summer. It was Bootsy and Parliament and at Grant Park. You know, so there was about, you guys mentioned 100,000, there's about 100,000 of us out there, maybe a little more, because it's free. And like you said, you look in the crowd, and we are a minority in society. We were a minority at this concert.
That's interesting, yeah. But it's really, it is a worldwide thing, and we saw these Japanese audiences. They were absolutely ecstatic. They were like all like little kids. They were smiling. It's like they all just got a free trip to Disneyland or something. That's how happy they were. And when Bootsy came out on stage, and they're just like, he's like looking at him like he's a superhero, you know. And Brazil, they went crazy. And Europe, they went crazy. And we played to all these huge crowds. And that's that was the biggest surprise to me, was going overseas and finding out how popular funk music is all over the world. And so Bootsy has a lyric all around the world for the funk. And
well, they really respect the music, you know, and it's almost as if they understand it better than we do.
In fact, in Japan, you remember this, where they were doing the P-Funk chants in English. That would be like us going to a concert and knowing Japanese and singing along with somebody. It's like, are you kidding me? They're speaking English. Yeah, it was amazing.
You know, we were talking about innovators. You know, Dayton is, at one time, had more patents filed in the U.S. Patent Office than any city in the United States of America. Because, you know, when you think about it, especially as the automotive industry, the starter, the automatic transmission, power windows, air conditioning, we can go on and on and on. There was a time when Dayton had more patents on file than any city in the United States of America.
Well, Dayton's got some great history to it. My mom worked at Wright Pat. My dad's brother was a pilot in World War II. My dad came up from New Orleans, where he was from, to visit his brother. and met my mom, and they wound up getting married. So you got Wright Patterson, you've got Delco, you had GM, you had Frigidaire,
NCR,
Dayco, all NCR, the whole history of NCR,
yes.
John Patterson and everything, and the flood, and him riding around on
yes.
boats rescuing people. I mean,
Yes.
Dayton has a really incredible history.
it
It
does.
really does. Yeah.
Now, what is your plan to increase awareness about the Funk Center? Or actually, do you have a plan? Well, I know you do now, since we've been conversing back and forth for some time now. But what is your plan moving forward?
Well, like we had discussed earlier, I'm in the process of getting Sun, which is now Sun Millennium, back out there. And, after playing with Bootsy for so long, I hooked up with Bootsy back in 2006 and did my first tour with him. Was the tribute to the Godfather of Soul tour that we did in 2008. And people want to know about this stuff, and and Bootsy said it, we got to bring back the funk. People, they want to hear it, they want to know about it. Young people, even the ones that would come to some of our shows that probably didn't know who Bootsy was or who we were or what the funk was all about. By the time the show is over, you're feeling it. It's just
You're on
yeah,
a high. It's a high.
yeah. And like Bootsy, right? He's working on his album, and he's trying to get that message across. I don't think the funk is ever going to die. He's just one of those people like George Clinton, and George said he's never going to stop. And they're just trying to keep it going. And I think Bootsy and George, that's the end of the road right there, because James is gone.
Yeah.
So you've got George and you got Bootsy. So when they're gone, where are you? So somebody's got to keep that. Well, son, exactly. We need to make people aware of it. People who don't know about it. But like I said, since we've been out there touring, a lot more people have come to know the funk.
Yeah, well, when we were over in Europe especially, people would come up to Keith because Bootsy would announce Keith as the former guitarist with the band Sun, and you'd hear some applause and some cries go up, and then they'd come up and talk to him, and they'd be like, well, when are you going to bring that group back? We still listen to him. And then your son, right, was in L.A., and he said they still play Sun on the radio out there.
Yeah, they're still playing the record.
So it's like,
still in rotation.
That's what Keith's planning on doing, is bring that that band back. And I hope I get to do some touring with you on that. I'm looking forward to that.
We're definitely going to be working together.
And then as far as what I could offer, I'm right down the road here, right down 75 in Miamisburg, so it's a quick trip up here for me, and I would be happy to come up and maybe we throw together a master class, and talk about horn playing, talk about rhythm section playing, and open it up to the public. Get a live audience in here, get some kids in here, and say just ask us some questions. What do you want to know about this stuff? And maybe play a few musical examples and say, if you have questions about this, we can probably answer a few of them for you.
Now, speaking of the sound itself, and I think in you guys' other segment, us on the outside looking in, remember it being, heavy bass, heavy drums. Without the bass and drums, no slight to the guitar or no slight to the keyboards and sax.
Yeah.
Without those two components in funk music, funk probably doesn't exist. Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so, we had the pleasure of, we've met Lannis Hughes, we've had him on. We had Frankie on, you just mentioned Frankie's name.
Yeah.
Two of my favorite drummers, not even knowing that I would meet them someday.
Yeah.
And now, the guitarist for Bootsy. I know, I've heard you play. Mr. Randy, you even gave us an impromptu session the other day. We'll get to that later.
Okay.
That was also a nice thing, but now watch this. So, we're building a museum, a physical building. So now when people come to this museum, and they're going to come from miles around, because you've got to see their renderings, this place is going to be amazing. when they exit the Funk Center or the Funk Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center, what would you like to see them walk away with? Because you two guys are gonna have a part in the museum. I mean, you know, we've got enough square footage to at least put your face up. So what would you like to see them walk away with when they exit our facility?
It's a clear understanding of what the funk is all about, where it came from, how it started.
Right. History.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And funk is history. And you know, you look at the people who started it, and it's continuing. And so when they walk out that door, I mean, I would love for these people to be walking to their cars or down the street, just, man, like, you know, just, oh, I didn't know that.
Information overload.
Wow, yeah, it's like now you've got all this, you know, and now go home and they'll let you understand this, you know, and it's not so much about this and, you know, I mean, we need more musicians.
Yes,
you know,
sir.
we need more young people to pick up guitars and drumsticks and play pianos
One of our
and
goals.
that type of thing.
We're going to see to that.
You know, so, but I know Bootsy's a big supporter of that type of thing also. You know.
I think if you have music playing in some of the exhibits too, it'd be nice that everybody catches that vibe, and then when they're leaving, they want to go right to the record store, or they want to go right home and get on iTunes and download some of this stuff, or go to YouTube and watch it, because there's so much of it. You know, people don't even realize how much. I don't even know how much there is. You know, I could still stand to fill in the gaps in my understanding of the history of it, and listen to all these great bands that came out of this area, you know, so there's just a ton of it.
We've been listening to some of these newer groups coming up, you know, like the Internet and Dirty Loops, that have taken on a different kind of vibe with the funk, in that you can hear the funk in the background, but they've done a little twist to it. But we're talking about, you know, kids or children and adults who went to school, learned how to play an instrument, and then were able to do their own take on how they felt about what they were listening to, you know, their own interpretation.
Yeah, it would be cool to tie it in to the overall cultural history, how it showed up in movies, how it showed up in television shows, et cetera, you know,
All right, so lastly, give me your fondest memory. Keep it clean, guys, keep it clean. On your funk experience that is so memorable that you talk about it even today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, keep it clean. Just the clean ones.
It's a lot.
I know it's for you two. It's got to be. I mean, but what is the one moment in your funk experience?
Well, one just popped into my mind, and you know, if I thought for a few more moments, I might have like 25 or 50 more. But I was just remembering when we were in Albany, New York, and it was this outdoor stage, and we had just inserted We've Got the Funk into the show. And when we hit that, we've got the funk, Bootsy doing that, it was like everybody was on that same page, on the one, and it was just joy. That's the best way I can describe it. You know, I mean, it was emotional because everybody was just.
It's okay, Randy.
No, okay. It was very much. It was like everybody was having such a good time, and it was just, with this world being so crazy the way it is now, to see that many people.
Vibing,
just all vibing together like that, and no worries for a minute.
That's got to be powerful.
And I felt very blessed and honored to be a part of that and delivering that to the people that night. That's the one I remember. I remember how I felt looking out there and seeing all those people, and it was just joy. It was pure joy. Yeah, that was a great moment.
Almost make me want to cry.
I don't know. For me, it was the day we received word from Capitol, back when I was with Sun, that the album had just gone gold, okay? Because that's something you dream about, you know, when you're younger. And I always wanted, you know, to have a record deal. Everybody I came up with said, oh man, well, one of these days we're gonna get a record deal, you know. I was just happened to be one of the lucky ones. And we were on tour with Chic. And we were sitting in the dressing room, and our manager came in, who was Bo Ray Fleming at the time, and he said, "Guys, we got some great news for you." We were like, "Yeah, what? You know, it gets better?" He said, "You guys just won certified gold," and we were like,
Nice.
"What?" And I mean, when he said that, I got chills, right?
Right.
When I got back to the hotel, I called my mom. Right? I said, "Mom, we just got a gold album." You know,
Yeah.
she was like, "Really?" She's screaming.
Yeah.
And by the time I got home, we were on the road for about another 3 weeks. By the time I got home, everybody knew about it. And we had, we're on our way to LA to do Soul Train. And when that aired, when we did that show, that told me, like, wow, Keith, you know,
I have arrived.
little
It's
small
real.
town guitar player out of Cincinnati, Ohio, it's all over the media now,
Yeah.
you know, and that's when it really sunk in, like, man, yeah, I'm actually doing what I've always dreamed of doing, and it was great, you know.
Yeah, you
while
can
it
see that
lasted.
video on YouTube too. It's up there of Sun when Keith, you know, when you were on Soul Train.
Soul Train,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So that the Gold album and you know the Soul Train thing. It's like I said, it's so many different things I can talk about, but that has to be number one. And eventually, I believe the album went on the plaque because it kept selling, you know, over the years.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that did it for me.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, for me, again, I've had another amazing time. Keith, Randy, thank you so much.
Thank you,
That's
George.
round one.
Thank you.
Round two.
Absolutely.
Round two, it'll be a little different because we'll get into, you know, what's your favorite kind of guitar, or what's your favorite saxophone to play on, or your favorite kind of reed, or
Sure.
those kinds of things. But for now, we just wanted to get the general background knowledge of the Funk Center. We're glad you're a part of it. We appreciate you as musicians and as men. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George.
And it's been a blast.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank you
sir.
so much.
Thank you,
All
thank
right.
you, thank you.
Thank you.